Ladies and gentlemen, for our next period of broadcast, we suggest that you switch your receivers to cover the television band.
Gee, Dad, another telecast. Would you like to see it?
Why, sure, Betty. Turn it on, and I'll draw up a chair for Mother.
Good evening, folks. We're telecasting now the Taylor Wine Hour. You're going to see and listen to something altogether different tonight. The art of winemaking as it is practiced right here in this country by one of the world's finest winemaking organizations, whose fame has come down to us from generation to generation. And this leads up, most naturally, to the fine gentleman I'd like to have make your acquaintance. Without further introduction, Mr. Greyton H. Taylor of the Taylor Wine Company, who has a brief but interesting message for us all. Mr. Taylor.
When one's life has been engaged in the pleasurable and sometimes profitable profession of making fine wines, there is a natural feeling of pride in being able to give you a visual presentation of the various activities which enter into winemaking as it is practiced by the Taylor Wine Company in Hammondsport, New York. So many things enter into the making of really fine wines that I'm glad our announcer is going to explain the process to you rather than myself. For I must confess, I would be unable to do justice to the subject in the brief time that we are to be with you. I will say, however, that despite the reams of literature that have been penned by some of the finest writers on winemaking, it is an art to which justice is rarely given, an art of the ages, but an art, nonetheless, which well repays a more intimate knowledge on the part of everyone who has any connection with the wine business, either as a vineyardist, a producer, a dealer, or best of all, as a consumer.
To properly introduce this special broadcast, perhaps it's advisable to tell you something about that particular section of the United States so famous for its fine grape-producing area. Situated in New York State and in the heart of the beautiful Finger Lakes region lies a small area that has been so endowed by nature as to provide ideal climatic conditions for the growing of this country's finest native grapes. On the slopes of the many hills surrounding the Finger Lakes, notably Keuka Lake, the finest vineyards are to be found. In the center of this district, the picturesque Taylor Winery nestles snugly against the side of a gently sloping hill. Through gracious portals reminiscent of the old world, the House of Taylor bids its many guests a warm and cordial welcome. Gracefully blending the old with the new, the architecture of the winery lends enchantment and romance to nature's already beautiful background. The antique walls and quaintly fashioned doorways speak softly of the deep buried vaults and passages where countless gallons of clear, sparkling wine lie stored, slowly acquiring the delightful fragrance and exquisite flavor so essential to truly fine wines. To adequately tell the story of the making of these fine wines, it is well to consider the importance of nature in the development of the basic product, the grape. Nature, in her inimitable way, has seen fit to favor the growth of the delicate grapevine by tempering the climate of this small area around Keuka Lake. By providing moderate winters and cool summers with a proper abundance of rain, exact duplication of the most famous European grape areas has been made possible. Early in the winter, the grape growing season begins. The many gently sloping hills around the lake and nearby valleys are covered with many hundreds of vineyards, maintained with a care and skill that the vineyardists of this locality have acquired through many years of careful cultivation. The art of grape growing, originally brought over from the old world, is one genuinely prized by the friendly people of this community. With each new generation carrying on the tradition of the old and adding the scientific knowledge of today, a rare and intimate knowledge of how to grow the finest of domestic wine-producing grapes has been acquired. The vineyardist's labors also begin early in the winter. It is then that he spends many tedious days in the vineyards, cutting and removing the previous year's growth of vine. On the first warm days of spring, as nature awakens to a new life, the vineyardist may be found driving more tightly in the ground the many stakes that hold the supporting wires. An arduous task? Yes, yet very essential to a successful growing season. With stout pliers and sturdy muscle, these many wires are pulled up tight and securely fastened to the supporting posts. Before long, the vines will be sprouting with a new year's growth. A mantle of large green leaves will follow, and then the many clusters of fine, luscious grapes will crown the vineyardist's tireless efforts throughout the season. To assist the vine in its natural adherence to the wires and to assure proper guidance and separation of the various branches, they must be tied to the wires individually with thin, though tough branches of the willow bush. Just stop and think of the tediousness of this task. Hundreds and hundreds of nuts to be tied by hand, day in and day out, until the entire vineyard has been covered. The spring season also heralds the time for setting out new vineyards. The land, carefully chosen, requires thorough plowing, after which time the vineyardist, with infinite care, plants each vine root by hand, firmly tamping down the soil around it. These new vineyards, of course, demand careful cultivation throughout their young life to provide the tender vines with all the nourishment that is available in the soil. A full-grown, fruit-bearing vine takes about 5 years to reach maturity and requires all the skill that the vineyardist can give during this critical period. During Prohibition, when demand was low, there was naturally little incentive for growers to add to the acreage of their vineyards. Today, however, these same vineyardists have set to with renewed interest and planted more and more varieties of wine grape-bearing roots. In the spring, the older vineyards require considerable care also. The soil, banked against the vines during the past year and hardened by the cold winter frosts, must be thoroughly loosened and pushed away by plowing. This task may sound easy, but to guide the head of the plow closely to the roots without injuring them is a delicate yet strenuous task. To more thoroughly divide the soil, the ground is then carefully hoed by hand. This permits easy access for the nitrogen in the spring rains and the glowing warmth of the early sun. To add to nature's own gift of nitrogen, the vineyardist finds it wise to spread chemical nitrate by hand. As spring advances toward early summer, the young, tender shoots begin to appear from the buds of last year's canes that were left in the pruning. The foliage becomes heavier, and delicate white blossoms appear in rapid succession. To support the more abundant foliage and consequent heavier vines, and to prepare for the heavy-laden clusters of grapes that are to follow, the vineyardist must again tie the vines more securely to the supporting wires. This he does with tough, though thin wisps of rye straw, a tedious task, yet one most essential to the control of adequate growth of the vines and to the provision of adequate air circulation as the fruit is formed. Then, too, to guard against the development of plant disease and mildew during the early summer, the progressive vineyardist sprays his vines with a solution of what is known as Bordeaux mixture, an insecticide and fungi preventative. To see the old-fashioned horse-drawn spray rig winding itself down through the rows of vines on the colorful hillsides of this area is a quaint sight that makes vineyarding so romantic and interesting to the layman. By July, the foliage has become quite heavy, and the grapes may be seen in well-defined clusters. A second plowing is now needed. This time, the soil is plowed back toward the vine, thus giving both the old and new roots additional soil from which to draw nourishment. It serves also as a protection for the vine against severe frost during the winter that is to follow. This plowing back also destroys wild vegetation growing between the rows of vines and permits a fuller flow of nourishment to them. Like the old master before his canvas, nature with deft strokes of summer sunshine skillfully transfers the hillsides into a beautiful quilt of variegated green against a sky of azure blue. By September, we find the grapes maturing rather rapidly. Varieties such as Delawares and Elviras are among the first to ripen, followed by Niagaras, Concords, Clintons, and Ives. Catawbas are the last to reach the fully ripened state. With the coming of early fall, as the grapes rapidly approach maturity, technical experts from the wineries survey crop conditions throughout the grape belt. At this time, careful and critical analysis of quality and supply are made, and only those vineyards bearing the finest quality grapes are selected for purchase. As the quality of grapes is such an important factor in the production of truly fine wines, the duty of this selection is entrusted only to the natural and scientific judgment of the expert. At Taylor's, Mr. Fred Taylor himself makes these selections, and it's largely due to his accurate knowledge of grapes that Taylor wines are so excellent in both flavor and bouquet. With a life devoted to the study of grapes and winemaking, Mr. Taylor has little difficulty in making exact and accurate selections as he travels over the colorful vineyards dotting the hills of this famous area. In making arrangements for crop purchase, exact stipulation is made that the grapes be picked and delivered by the vineyardist only when they have reached full ripeness and maturity. Harvesting time. All through the many vineyards dotting the hilly slopes of this famous region, hundreds of gaily colored pickers are to be seen, busily gathering the beautiful clusters of fully ripened fruit. Carefully cut from the vines, the clusters are laid in shallow trays, each holding about 40 pounds of grapes. They're then carried to the ends of the vineyards, loaded on wagons or trucks, and transported to the winery. Standing on the balcony of the winery, one may see the endless procession of the many vehicles bringing the grapes. Hundreds and hundreds of trays filled with luscious fruit, colored in delicate tones of purple, blue, and green. What a sight. Truly one's mouth begins to water with the increasing desire to taste of these beautiful gifts from Mother Nature. Due to the strictly seasonal conditions of this specialized industry, a modern winery must be equipped to handle a relatively large pressing schedule during the limited period of 5 to 6 weeks. And thus we see the Taylor Winery at this time buzzing with real activity. Transferred to the winery, the grapes are first weighed in and the trays are placed on a conveyor, carrying them to an upper floor. Again, as they pass in review, the clusters are checked to meet the exacting standard set forth by the House of Taylor. Arrangements are made with the vineyardists so that the flow of ripened grapes will reach the winery in such schedule as will match the pressing speed of the various presses. Over 100 tons of grapes a day are pressed under normal schedule. Arriving at the top of the conveyor, the individual trays are emptied into a hopper. Here the grapes are again conveyed to a nearby crusher where the skins are broken and the fruit prepared for the presses. The empty trays, before returning to the waiting trucks below, are again weighed in, thus arriving at the net weight of the delivered fruit. Even though a large staff of trained workers are maintained at the winery during the entire year, the short 5 to 6 weeks period when the ripened fruit is delivered creates an unusually heavy demand for additional help, for in this short time the entire crop of grapes must be pressed. But back to our story. On the floor below and directly beneath the crusher may be found the presses that squeeze the juice from the previously crushed grapes. Here, under the personal supervision of Mr. Clarence Taylor, Director of Plant Operations, we find one of the most spectacular processes taking place. Tons and tons of crushed fruit pass through the presses, where the sparkling clear juice is squeezed from the seeds and skins. The individual layers of crushed grapes that are built up and covered by special heavy cotton cloths are called cheeses, an odd and interesting term used by winemakers throughout the world. In order to understand, let us move up and more closely examine this interesting operation. In the beginning, the formation of the cheese may be observed. Here, about 300 pounds of crushed grapes are lowered through a copper chute onto a cotton cloth. A square wooden frame is then placed so as to retain the mass of crushed grapes. When filled, the edges of the cloth are turned over, making the pack or cheese. With a separating latticed rack on top, the operation is repeated until 24 cheeses have been built up. Over 3.5 tons of crushed grapes to each press, as the group of cheeses is called. The press is then moved over on a track to where it may be given a preliminary squeezing with a 3-ton weight. This partial pressure extracts the larger portion of the juice and more firmly packs the cheese for the final press that is to follow. What a sight! Gallons upon gallons of bright, clear, sparkling juice flowing freely from the press. Yes, enough to make your mouth fairly water. Moved now to the hydraulic press, the partially squeezed press receives a pressure of over 2,500 pounds to the square inch. This efficient pressing extracts the last vestige of juice from the cheeses. As the juice flows to a receiving tank on the floor below, the mass of seeds and skins left behind in the cheeses, and known as pumice, is separated from the press cloths. This pumice, having no commercial value whatsoever, is discarded. The cloths, after removal, are cleaned and returned to the cheese builders to be used again. In the making of Taylor wines, we find only the use of freshly run juice. Fermentation is never allowed to take place on the skins, just another important factor in the production of truly fine wines. And this brings us to another milestone in the story of making Taylor wines. As we pass to another interesting part of the winery, we find the juice, now technically known as must, transferred to the fermenting room. Here it is run into large fermenting tanks having a capacity of about 5,000 gallons apiece. The acid and sugar content of the different grape musts varies from year to year and is watched carefully by the winemaker, the real test of his skill and experience. Peering within one of the fermenting tanks, we find the must, where yeast, through its action on the sugar, causes a splitting up of the sugar into alcohol and carbon dioxide gas. Notice the turbulent action on the surface. It is caused by the escape of the carbon dioxide gas. Fermentation usually takes from 10 days to a month for completion, depending on the variety of grape must used and the temperature involved. The ideal fermentation takes place at a temperature of 68 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit, which is carefully controlled here in the Taylor winery. After fermentation is complete, the wine is racked off, the lees of the fermenters. It is heavy with suspended matter and must be thoroughly clarified before being stored away in the cellars. So, in an adjacent part of the winery, we find a group of winemakers busy adjusting the pressure filters and pumps that affect this process of clarification. A filter cell is used in the filter press. The wine, when leaving the filter, is crystal clear, and the entire process reflects the meticulous manner in which these wines are made. But new wine, however, still holds in solution an excess of certain salts known as tartrates. The excess of these salts is removed by passing the wine through a cooling system at a temperature of about 34 degrees Fahrenheit. These tartrates start settling out immediately as the wine is run into the storage vaults. Down deep beneath the surface of the ground, actually within the side of the hill on which the Taylor winery is built, we find the many subterranean passages that house the various storage casks. Passing down the massive stairway to these cellars is like passing from the new world to the old. Cask upon cask line the sides of these ancient walls, some of them over 50 years old, and all of them filled to the brim with varieties such as Delaware, Elvira, Catawba, and other still wines. In addition, there is the Cuvée, which is later used in the production of Chateau Reims. It is into these massive casks that the crystal clear, filtered, cool wine is pumped from the floors above. The casks, as stated before, must be kept completely filled at all times to prevent the slightest oxidation. Should this occur, it would cause the formation of volatile acids, which would seriously impair the flavor of the wine and prevent it from complying with government standards. Cellarmen are constantly examining the casks in these Taylor vaults to ensure a production of really good, sound wines. But what have we here? A man? Yes, and fully grown, too. Is he going inside the cask? Well, it looks like it, for he's certainly squirming his way into this one. One would imagine the abilities of a contortionist would be required to enter this opening, but it's all in knowing how. The sides, top, and bottom of the tank are coated with whinstone and crude tartrates, which have settled out of the wine. They are periodically removed. It's a matter of first importance that a uniform low temperature should prevail in these dry wine storage vaults throughout the year. Tailors take no chances. Variations in temperature are kept within a narrow range, or approximately 5 degrees Fahrenheit, the mean temperature being 50 degrees. Exact daily records are kept of the temperature in the vaults, cooling facilities being employed whenever necessary. And now, as we wind our way through the maze of storage vats in the winery, we're at once impressed with the gigantic scale of this winery. One vat after another, holding thousands upon thousands of gallons of still wines, break to our view at every turn. We're impressed, and you would be too, to see so many vats so close together that there is scarcely room to walk. Yes, and you'd be impressed, too, with the infinite cleanliness about it all. Such maintenance is truly typical of Taylor's, a tribute to a keen sense of what even a casual visitor would appreciate. Those of artistic tastes accompanying us would well appreciate the beauty of form and pattern that these vats make in the dimly lighted vaults. Solid vats of stout and strong oak, towering almost to the ceiling, are even more impressive in the cool and quiet stillness of the vaults that house them. But back again to our story. Before a blend is to be made, it is always necessary to know the composition of each wine that's to be used. Through a trap door in the floor above, uniform samples of the various wines are withdrawn by a cellarman. After inspecting it himself, it is turned over to the Taylor Laboratory for a truly scientific and accurate analysis. The Taylor Wine Company, keenly aware of the value and importance of modern scientific control, maintains an established, up-to-date, well-equipped laboratory. Here, the members of the scientific staff are continually employed in both control and research work. There's no guesswork here. Before any wine is actually blended, a strict laboratory blend is made and rigorously tested. Through the use of wines of varying sugar and alcoholic content, it is possible to assure a finished wine of uniform composition and quality. All wines throughout the Taylor Winery are subjected to regular critical laboratory examination. These scientific examinations are constantly made to guard against any deviation from set standards, and the laboratory always works in close cooperation with the winemaker himself, thus assuring the consumer of uniform and high-quality wines at all times. In the manufacture of sweet wines, such as port, white Tokay, sherry, and muscatel, it is necessary to raise the alcoholic content of the blending wines from about 12 to 20% by the addition of pure grape brandy. At this time, such wines are sweetened with cane sugar to the degree of sweetness which that particular wine requires. This process is called fortifying. The large white oak tanks that you now see have a capacity of 16,000 gallons each. They're equipped with mechanical agitators in order that they may be rapidly stirred. Samples are taken and tested by the government gauger who is in constant attendance during this process. From each tank of fortified wine, a sample is taken and sent to government laboratories for their own analysis. When fortification is complete, the winemaker is ready to prepare his wine blends. The winemaker's skill, acquired by the many years of experience, combined with laboratory ascertainments, assures wine varieties distinctly true to their types. Another reason why Taylor wines have such a meritorious reputation. The blended wines are then returned to the tanks, where they're left until ready for final filtration and bottling. The final filtration is accomplished through what is known as a Seitz germ-proof filter. This filter removes whatever fine suspended matter may have been left in the wine and produces wines at Taylor's of exceptional brilliance and clarity. Chateau Reims is the trade name for a blend of delicate dry wines. Into this blend, or cuvée, is placed a dosage of brandy and rock candy syrup. It is chilled, saturated with pure carbon dioxide gas, and filled directly into the bottles at 75 pounds pressure. Skilled hand labor is used to decorate and pack the bottles, which have just been filled with Chateau Reims. Notice the neatness with which each worker performs his particular job, each step according to Taylor traditions. But let us watch these interesting operations more slowly. The individual Taylor bottle is thoroughly inspected. Should a bottle contain specks, such as fragments of cork left by the corking machine, that bottle is immediately rejected and returned to the vaults for refiltration. The first step in the decoration of Chateau Reims is the application of the Taylor body label. The labels, first placed on a board, are gently but firmly centered and finally applied by hand to the main body of the bottle. The bottle then passes to the next operator, who skillfully applies gold foil to its top and neck. The foil he applies is pliable and is handled in such a manner that it conforms closely to the contours of the bottle neck, cork, and wire hood, the familiar Taylor packaging. The neck label is now attached immediately below the gold foil. This label, oddly shaped as you look at it, laying flat, is so designed that it perfectly fits the contour of the bottle neck when applied. This completes the actual labeling of Chateau Reims. Finally, the bottles are carefully wrapped with individual sheets of paper and then enclosed in straw covers designed to fit each bottle. They are then laid in a horizontal position in the cases so that the corks remain moist to prevent their drying and consequent loss of sparkle to the wine. Tailors are mighty particular about these operations. And now we shall take you to still another department in the winery, that department devoted to the bottling of Taylor still wines. Still wines, both sweet and dry, are here bottled in a light, well-ventilated room. It's equipped with the most modern automatic bottling machines to fill the various types of glass containers. In a 9-hour day, it is possible to fill upward of 1,000 cases of still wines. After each day's run, this equipment is thoroughly cleaned, inspected, and prepared for the next day, all according to Taylor standards. Over on one side of the room, we find a group of operators filling the popular gallon and half-gallon jugs. Special equipment is necessary to fill these large containers, even though they are filled semi-automatically. What a sparkle and clarity to the wine as it rapidly fills the jugs. A conveyor carries the fill jugs on a belt from which they are removed and the labels applied. Due to the size and weight of these containers, they must be labeled by hand. The workmen doing the labeling require a keen sense of symmetry in order to center the labels readily on the sides of the jugs. These moist neck pieces, which are being dropped over the top of each jug, will gradually dry out and fit snugly, joining the screw cap with the glass jug itself. In certain instances, it's necessary to apply state wine stamps direct to the individual package, and because of the nature of these stamps, they must be attached manually. Tailors have made the standard bottling operation almost entirely automatic. Despite the fact that brand new bottles are used exclusively here, each and every one is placed on a spigot in a modern bottle washing machine where it is thoroughly cleaned both inside and out. Tailor bottles are brilliantly clear and spotlessly clean when they leave the washing machines. They are discharged from the washer onto a conveyor timed in synchronization with the speed of the filling machines. They enter the filling machines in orderly fashion, uniformly spaced, and take their proper places. The filling machine at Taylor's is circular in shape and fitted with 18 dispensing tubes, so placed as to deliver the exact amount of wine to each bottle. The machine rotates slowly, picking up one bottle at a time from a conveyor coming from the bottle washer. As the bottles slowly fill to the proper level, they're discharged onto another conveyor for transportation to the capping machine. An interesting fact about this machine is that all metal parts coming in contact with the wine are silver-plated. The bottles being filled are immediately sealed with an aluminum paper spotted cap. After the caps have been properly set, the individual bottles travel like an army of soldiers on a conveyor to the labeling machines. The brilliantly clear wine in the spotlessly clean bottles makes an imposing sight as they travel along this conveyor. At the labeler, automatic hands pick up the labels and place them one by one on each individual bottle. The machine, with more than human accuracy, labels at a speed of 30 bottles a minute. This is an exceedingly interesting piece of automatic machinery which never fails to hold the attention of the many visitors who find a trip through the Taylor winery an interesting and never-to-be-forgotten experience. Following the labeling, the bottles receive lead capsules that are imported from England. They're applied by hand as they pass on the conveyor and are handsomely embossed with the Taylor signature on the side and familiar trademark on the top, a real finishing touch to this already beautiful package. And now is the final stage of preparation. A busy group of able hands deftly feed each bottle into a machine that molds and fits the lead caps closely to the contours of the bottle cap and neck. In this machine, each bottle is rotated as it firmly crimps the lead caps into place. If we might ride the conveyor with these bottles, we would see Taylor's New York State White Tokay receiving these final preparations for the consumer. As mentioned before, the Taylor winery uses only new bottles shipped directly from the glass factory in reshipping cartons. After the bottles have been filled, they're packed back into these cartons and made ready for national distribution. Ever progressive in the field of the uses of fine wines, a modern, well-equipped experimental kitchen was established in connection with the Taylor Wine Company's public relation work. Here, under the supervision of a trained food counselor, delicious recipes are created and tested. The distribution of these recipes is doing much to revive the lost art of wine cookery. What sounds more enticing than sherry chiffon pie, pineapple sherry mousse, or Spanish cream tokay? These and many hundreds of other wine recipes are provided by Taylor's. They're exceedingly easy to prepare by any housewife and add a new zest to the graceful art of modern entertaining. And now, standing in the reception room before a sparkling display, we pause to view the many delicious varieties of these exquisite New York State wines. What a background of old world romance and charm. What a perfect blend of the handiwork of men and nature. What a tribute to the infinite skill of the vineyardist, the winemaker, the scientist, and the producer. And so, we come to the end of our story. The story of an age-old art, replete with modern, progressive attitude and scientific achievement. The story of a product both beautiful to behold and most delicious to taste. The story of the making of the most domestic wines by Taylor.